Greetings Boffins, welcome to the Boffin Lab. I'm Mardor Taran and we're playing EVE Online. One of the most fundamental concepts of EVE Online is fitting your ship, since that's what you're going to use in almost anything you're going to do. In order to fit your ship, you first need to open the fitting window. The fitting window is found either here on the Station Services panel or here on the Neocom. You can also use the default hotkey of Alt F to open it up. The fitting window has several sections on it. On the far left, you'll see skins. Skins are color patterns available for your ship, and you usually either find them or buy them. The middle shows your ship and anything fitted to it, plus the fitting disc, which I'll explain in a minute. Down the right side of the screen is the statistics for the ship. And in the top right, there is the ship information. It's worth checking this when you're fitting a ship, because every ship has a set of traits associated with it. Ships are specialized to use particular equipment. In this case, the Velator is specialized in using small hybrid turrets, drones, remote sensor dampeners, and armor repairers, which is a good indication that this ship is intended to repair its armor as part of its defense system. There are some important features in this fitting disc. Down here are the most important. Every ship has a CPU value and a power grid value, and just about every module has a CPU and a power grid cost. Let's have a look at one. I right click on a module and choose show info, and then I hit the fittings tab. It gives me 3 pieces of critical information. First, it tells me that this item requires a high slot to fit. Next, it shows me the CPU cost and the power grid cost to fit that module. These values will depend on your skills, and so will the values on your ship. So you will find that it is much easier to work out what your ship can take if you use one of the many ship fitting tools available. This will allow you to play with ship fittings even if you haven't got the equipment you want to use. Otherwise, you might be stuck with buying stuff off the market and finding out if it'll work. At the moment, I'm just going to use what I have in my item hanger. In this case, I have 2 civilian light electron blasters, 2 civilian miners, a civilian kinetic deflection field, which is a shield protection module, a civilian stasis webifier, which is intended to slow a target down, and a civilian damage control, which is intended to increase the resistances of your shields, armor, and hull. At the top, the ship is telling me that I may have 2 turrets of some nature, and I currently do not have any fitted, or 1 launcher. I can have a combination of these weapon systems. So since I have 2 high slots, I may have 1 turret and 1 launcher, or 2 turrets. Let me show you what happens when I fit a turret to the system. It shows that now one of my turret hardpoints has been used, and there is now a weapon on my ship display. Different ships will have different patterns of high, medium and low slots, and you will learn how to work out what a ship is best at based on these patterns. At the moment, this rookie ship just provides you with really basic layouts. If I were to choose a combat role for this ship, I would probably go ahead and fit 2 civilian light electron blasters. The civilian gear is intended so that any rookie can use it. Furthermore, civilian weapons don't require ammunition of any form. However, they don't have a great deal of real value. You're not going to get much trying to sell this stuff, but they'll get you started. Along this arc, there are 2 readouts. One is my CPU in the blue, and the other is my power grid in the red. As I fit modules, their values changes, indicating how much of my CPU and power grid is left for me to use. If you fit a module and it exceeds one of these values, it will appear as offline, and that will be grayed out. It's still fitted to your ship, but you won't be able to use it. However, there is a way of bringing it online. If you turn off in space enough equipment to free up the CPU and power grid needed for that object, you can online it in space. This is more of an advanced technique, and sometimes people might have an offline module for those rare situations that they need it, simply because they're not desperately after that slot at the time. However, for a basic ship fitting, you shouldn't be thinking about having offline modules. Make use of the slots that you have. Different ships are intended to be protected in different ways. As a general rule, Ammar and Galantian ships are intended to repair their armor, and one of the ways you can tell this is by looking at the statistics for their shields and armor. This velator has less shields than it does armor, and, as we saw earlier, it has a bonus to using an armor repairer. That means that to protect this ship, it's to your advantage to use an armor repairer that goes into the low slots. Try not to combine armor and shield protection at the same time. Concentrate on one. If you have an armor repairer in the low slot, then consider using your medium slots for things like propulsion modules or energy modules so that you can feed your armor repairer. If you fly in a Mimitar or Caldari ship, they're designed to have their shields repaired, and they should have bonuses to doing so. Their ships will most likely have more shield values than armor, and they tend to have more medium slots so that they can fit shield protection modules. Look at your ship and check its layout and bonuses. That should give you a good idea how you should go about fitting them. In the defense panel on the right, we see some critical information. Damage in this game comes in 4 types: explosives, kinetic, thermal, and EM. Different ships have resistances to different values for these different damage types. As you can see, shields tend to be very vulnerable to EM damage since it has no resistance to it. That means that every point of damage with an EM weapon done to the shields will be done at a 1-to-1 rate. However, if I fire at the shields with a weapon doing explosive damage, it's only going to be half as effective due to the resistance against explosive damage. One way to ensure protection of your ship is to increase the resistances against different damage types. There are a lot of modules that do this. The civilian damage control is known to give resistances to hull, armor, and shields all at the same time, and is considered a largely critical piece of equipment. This item, the civilian kinetic deflection field, when turned on, will increase my shield kinetic damage resistance, making it easier for me to resist damage from that particular source. The different enemies in the game will do damages of a particular blend. For example, the Serpentis organization does kinetic and thermal damage. So if I plan on fighting Serpentis enemies, then I should plan on resisting kinetic and thermal damage, and I can largely ignore the other two. However, when you're playing against other players, you should be looking at protecting all of the resistances, because you're not actually sure what the enemy is going to throw at you. It is possible to get hull repairs, but this is not intended to be a way of defending yourself during a fight. If you get a hull repairer, what you should be doing with it is repairing your hull while you're between missions, as a cheaper way of repairing your ship. You could also fit an armor repairer even if your ship's intended to do shields. This is a cheap way of repairing the armor and saving a little bit of cash if you don't mind spending a little bit of time. You could then strip off the armor and hull repairer and refit your ship the normal way, whatever suits you. I'm going to add a few modules and show you another important feature. At the top here is my capacitor readout. Capacitor recharges, as does shields, and both recharge based on their total and a recharge rate. And these are often dictated by the ship and your skills. It is currently showing that if I ran all of the modules attached to my ship, the recharge rate for my capacitor would mean that I wouldn't ever run out of capacitor. It is stable, and we call this cap stable. This is a term that you're going to need to remember, because having your ship cap stable when you're fighting, say, NPC enemies is a very big advantage. It means you can run all of your protections and weapons without ever having to worry about them stopping. However, when you're adding a protection module, you will probably find that it won't be stable, at least until your skills increase. You will be forced to carefully decide how much time each piece of equipment runs for, so that you can then turn it off and let your capacitor rebuild. This juggling act is one of the key skills in EVE Online, making sure your capacitor recharges enough for you to then run the equipment you need to continue the fight. If I mouse over an object, it will show me an estimate of how much capacitor and power grid I will have left when I fit that object. You see the yellow numbers on the fitting screen, and the little graphs for CPU and power grid change. That will give me a rough idea if I can successfully fit that module and use it. So you've got a basic idea of how to fit your ship. You'll find ship fitting is one of those topics that is constantly debated. It'll be a great discussion, and it's worth learning so that you can get involved. Asking friends and others what they think is a good move is also a great way to learn, though at least you can get them to explain why they think their fitting works better. I hope I've given you the basics. Have fun out there. Good hunting.